Okay, coming up on this edition of the Penn State Blitz, training camp for Penn State just keeps rolling. We're going to talk about what Greg and I have learned specifically on offense. We're also going to take a look at Penn State's defensive line, and there's much more to it besides Yetur Gross-Matos. Penn State got yet another four-star running back. The rich get richer. And then we're going to close it out with the Penn State Mailbag. Okay, Greg, we're getting close to the halfway point.
Mm-hmm.
I know you gave me a nice little tidbit on Idaho last week. I won't ask you for any more. We're still a couple weeks out. Let's not waste it. But had a chance to talk to James Franklin a couple days ago or last week. We always like to ask about the young guys. What have you heard, or what did you like about what he had to say maybe about Penn State's offense?
Yeah, you look at this group, and obviously it's made up of a lot of former highly regarded recruiting talent, from Sean Clifford to KJ Hamler, Jahan Dotson, Justin Shorter, right down to Pat Fryermuth, and some of these offensive linemen, including Rasheed Walker, who was one of the top offensive tackles in his class. The question now, of course, is will that all translate onto the field? So it's great that they could do it against high school competition. It was great that they were rated highly based on what they did on paper with their testing numbers and things like that. But will it translate to the Big Ten level of play? And that's what most of these guys are going to have to answer. You know, KJ Hamler, Jahan Dotson, they've answered that question. Pat Fryermuth has answered that question. Ricky Slade, to an extent, has answered that question. But a lot of these guys, we're going to have to wait and see how it turns out. And I think that's probably the biggest takeaway for me at this point, is that we're hearing a lot of good things about the guys on offense, but Bob, are we really going to know what we're going to see out of those guys until the ball's actually in the air for real?
Yeah, for me, it was James talked. He elaborated a little bit about the two true freshman running backs. You know, Noah Cain is a guy that I think what he did in spring and even during winter conditioning really carried over for James, and he basically said, you know, in practice, you know, we're not really looking for a lot. It's going to be, because they hadn't really started hitting yet. It's going to be, you know, when the bullets start firing, and we need it's 3rd and 1, and we're going to try and run the ball. It sounds to me like he might be the guy they look to because of the way that he's always falling forward, doesn't lose yards. Between the tackles, running the ball between the tackles is a big part of their game, and I think that they do like Noah Cain a lot in terms of playing, but Devin Ford, who might be even more talented than Noah, has only started practicing in August, and James had some interesting things to say about him.
Yeah, I mean, he's basically said the guy is come in and done what he needs to do. I mean, Pat Fryermuth on the Big Ten Network practice stop pointed him out specifically as a guy who's been impressive during practice so far. I think this is a big year for Penn State, and they can't really mess it up when it comes to this running back rotation because it has ramifications, I think, for recruiting years to come down the road. Because if one or both of Noah Cain and Devin Ford they don't have to be, you know, the starter and the guy that gets every single carry. But if you don't make sure that those guys have a role, what are future recruits going to say when you tell them, well, there's all these guys on our roster that are really good. We're going to make sure you have a role too. So I think they have to be a little bit careful with how they use and more importantly, maybe do not use those guys just to make sure they can continue getting guys. You know, two 4-star backs in a class like this is not really common for most college football teams. So to make sure that can continue, they're going to have to use both of those guys in some way. The good news is it sounds like they've come into camp ready to play.
Yeah, and James talked about the fact that ideally they don't want the running backs to be this close together age-wise, and that is, I don't know if it's a concern, but they're aware of it. I would just say this. Penn State's been pretty fortunate when it comes to their best running back staying healthy since 2015, Saquon Barkley's first year. He was a pretty durable guy for 3 years. Miles was durable last year. They both got a lot of carries. I think, but in, you know, the way of the world in the Big Ten, you're probably going to need to play 3 most years. So I do think things are going to sort themselves out. It's hard to imagine they're going to be fortunate in terms of good health. I think a couple of these guys are going to get dinged up. They're not the biggest guys in the world. So I think that they should feel good about 3. The interesting thing, though, is what are they going to do with Devin Ford? I mean, who would be the odd man out? It's really hard to play 4. You just wonder. They talk so much about Ricky and Journey Brown. You know, I just don't know how it's going to play out, but I think that maybe Penn State's going to need at least 3 of the 4 guys.
Yeah, there's no doubt. You'll see, I think, especially with the passing game, if they're going to actually get those guys more involved, some of their skill sets are more favorable to that than others.
Yeah. Okay, turning our attention to the defensive side. Everyone knows how good Yetur Gross-Matos is, and this Penn State defensive line going to be a strength. Defensive end group looks good. What about the defensive tackles?
Yeah, I think that's the question mark at this point. Robert Windsor's saying all the right things. It sounds like he's doing all the right things. Yeah. Who's going to line up beside him? Antonio Shelton is who most, I think, assume is going to be that guy, but he has that same trait, I guess you could say, it's guys on the offense, which is he's done it some at a consistent high level against the best competition, but not as much as he's going to be asked to do it this year. So how much time will he see? Where will P.J. Mustipher factor into all of this? Yeah. And are guys like Damian Barber and Fred Hansard ready to take the next step? You know, I think across the board, Terry Smith said not too long ago that they feel pretty good about the depth they have at almost every position in terms of having a 2 or 3 deep. Defensive tackle is probably one of the few spots where I don't know if you can be overly confident in the fact that you have a good 2 deep, let alone a 3 deep.
Yeah, and it's also going to be the quality of play. I mean, it's one thing to be able to put those guys out and they can kind of hold their own. Mm-hmm. Penn State's got to get to the point where, Greg, where they have guys that start to make flash plays or disruptive plays or momentum-turning plays. Mm-hmm. It's not enough just to occupy blockers. You think about Kevin Givens last year. He was a good player. But he was kind of that way almost in 2016 when he was a breakout. He never really they didn't get a lot of disruption up the middle, and I think that's the thing that's going to have to change if they're going to consistently try and beat Michigan and Ohio State. I'm real interested to see how P.J. Mustipher plays this year. I think out of all their defensive tackles, I think he clearly has the most upside, not only this year but moving forward. I think he is a guy that he could be an NFL player. We're already talking about maybe Robert Windsor as being an NFL player. So Mustipher is definitely, I think, a guy to watch. Let's talk about recruiting. Mm-hmm. We're talking about their 4-star running backs, their freshmen, Noah Cain and Devin Ford. Ricky Slade was a 5-star. Obviously, Barkley and Miles Sanders were both elite runners. So it's been really fun to kind of watch this running game evolve. Yeah. And now they picked up yet another 4-star running back for the 2020 class.
Correct, yeah. Caziah Holmes from Cocoa, Florida. Really good player. I mean, a guy that goes to the opening regional in Orlando, leaves as the running back MVP among a very strong group of high school kids down there, and was also the fastest guy in the 40. I think he was low 4.4s as a high school senior. So he has a little bit of that Journey Brown speed to him, and is a guy that has worked out of the backfield. I believe he's worked in the return game as well. So, you know, it's another win for Jaywan Sider. Penn State brings him up here a couple years ago, and you can make the argument that it was addition by subtraction for a year because of what it meant with David Corley and then how that receivers group fell off. But there's just no doubt what Jaywan Sider brings to this program, not only as a coach, but as a recruiter, too. He goes down to Florida, gets another top guy that the likes of Florida and Florida State, Tennessee, and some others want it.
Yeah, and so the one question I would have is, as we creep towards September, you know, signing day is getting closer. Is there any concern that they'll be able to hold on to him between now and December, I would think?
Yeah, you know, we had a guy down there that talked to him for us, and I thought the quotes he gave were pretty. You feel pretty good about it, but it's Florida recruiting. You just don't know. I mean, it's one of the more. Yeah. It's the state with one of the, if not the highest number of decommitments year in and year out in recruiting. So you are never going to feel great about a kid down there until that national letter of intent is faxed in. So I think the encouraging thing is it's August. It's not like you got his commitment in January and you have to hold him for almost a whole year. Right. You have to hold him through the season. So I think that helps a lot. Sider's relationship helps a lot. The fact that he knows guys like John Dunmore, TJ Jones, who are on this Penn State roster from Florida helps. Like I said, you can never rule it out, Bob, but I would be surprised if they lose his commitment.
Okay. Only one more segment left here on the Penn State Blitz. It's your favorite.
It is.
It's the Penn State Mailbag. What do you got?
That's right. Quick announcement that we're working on turning this and the Penn State predictions into a podcast. You know this, but you didn't know that was coming.
I did not know what the announcement was.
No, so that's exciting. So stay tuned for that. Fill in the blank, Bob. First question. Penn State's run defense will be better if it does this or does that. What is it? What must it do? Because even Brent Pry has been pretty vocal this offseason in saying, you can call us whatever you want, but if we don't fix the run defense, we're not going to get up there.
More destructive plays, better play from the tackles, and depth in the fourth quarter. I think it's actually three things. You only asked me for one, but I don't think one thing will get them to the next level.
So when you look at that fourth quarter depth, I think that's something that has been it's obviously it's a problem on both sides of the ball. So just rolling off of that, where do you feel like it is at this point of camp? Do you feel like that they've developed that I don't know if killer instinct's the right word, but that ability to go out there and say, we're not going to let another team push us around for the final 15 minutes and let them chew into, or in some cases, the final 7 or 8 minutes, whatever it ends up being, to chew into what appears to be a pretty sizable lead that ends up being a come-from-ahead loss.
Yeah, I think their depth at linebacker is definitely better, but their defensive ends, I don't know. Yetur, I think, is obviously an all-around defensive end. He made some plays against the run last year. We need to see if Shaka Toney is really a 3-down player. If Shane Simmons can stay healthy, what can they get from Jason Awe? But also the defensive tackles. I think where they got into trouble last year was when they had to play, Givens and Windsor a lot of snaps. So they would start the game fresh and everything would be good. But if they're on the field for 60 snaps in the fourth quarter, you can really get in trouble. So my question would be, are their second string defensive tackles good enough so that they're almost as good as starters, and it's a true rotation? If there's a drop off, then I think there's going to be more of an issue of that in the fourth quarter.
All right, last mailbag question for this week's edition of the Blitz, Bob. You mentioned them a second ago. 2 guys coming off of injuries who are said to be the healthiest they've ever been at Penn State. Who makes a bigger impact this year, Nick Bowers or Shane Simmons?
Ooh. The more talented, the more physically talented player is Shane Simmons.
Yeah.
I think it's him if they're both healthy. The reason I say that is I don't know how many 2 tight end sets we're going to see at Penn State, and I just don't know how many snaps he's going to play because it's going to be tough to take Frymuth off the field. I think Shane Simmons, talent-wise, is probably you can make a case that he's their second most talented defensive end behind Yetur until Jason catches up with him. And if he can play a full season and give them 25 to 30 snaps, that's going to be a lot better even. So I'm going to go with Shane Simmons.
All right.
Is that it?
That's it.
That's it for the mailbag?
That's it.
All right, next week I want 4 questions.
Okay.
I'll accept nothing less.